it's going to disappear, isn't it? There's not going to be any history of our current generation, is there? Because all these emails and so on are going to get deleted, they're going to get trashed, and memories are going to die, and so on. And what do we do with pictures? We used to print all our pictures, right? We used to have to take them, get them developed, and now they're digital, and we don't have to get them printed, and we just send them to somebody, right? What about jokes, Jeff? You don't have to tell them anymore. You just send them to somebody, right? What? Pardon me? You don't even have to remember them. You know the story about the guys that were in prison, and they were sitting there, and one guy said, 24. Ah! Another guy, 96. Oh, that's a good one. So somebody said, what's going on? Well, we've told all the jokes over and over and over, so we all know the jokes, so we've just got numbers on them, so we don't bother telling them anymore. Well, that's sort of the same way with social media, isn't it? Right? We just post them. What about contact with people from the past? Anybody here that's connected with somebody that you hadn't seen or heard tell of for years and years and years through social media? Yeah, one. Okay. Two. Okay, I had contact with somebody that I used to go to camp with. He sent me a picture from 1963. He was in it. I was in it. A couple of guys from Maine were in it. And he wanted a current picture of me, and I had one that was taken out here. Lewis and I were in a picture out here a couple of weeks ago, and I sent him that picture, and he cropped it and put it beside the other one and put them together. So 63 and 2023. That's, what's that, 60 years? Yeah, that's 60 years, isn't it? They were almost exactly 60 years apart. I look a little different then. Communicating with distant people. Very easy to communicate now. When Adoniram Judson went to Burma, what did he expect? How much communication did he expect to get? Not much. When Hudson Taylor went to China, how much communication did he expect to get? And if he did get any, how long did it take to come? 6 months, a year? Now you can communicate almost instantly. Contact with new people. People you've never seen or heard tell of before, and some you don't ever want to see again. And some you don't, you wish you hadn't contacted maybe. I'm being a little silly here, but okay. What is social media? It's a tool, isn't it? Social media is a tool. And the question is, how are we using it? As Christians, how are we using social media? Okay. Have you ever used a tool in an unconventional or destructive way? I brought some tools. There's my favorite hammer. I've had that hammer since 1976. I bought that hammer, and my son hates it because it's only a 12-ounce hammer. It's not meant for driving spikes, but it's great around the workshop. It's heavy enough to do stuff, but it's not too heavy to beat things to death. I love that hammer. What do you use a hammer for? What are you supposed to use a hammer for? Putting in nails. What if you have a screwdriver, and you have a screw that's going in too hard? What's the old saying? If the screw goes in too hard, get a bigger hammer, right? Hey, Walter, is that right? That's right. If the screw doesn't go in easy, just get a bigger hammer. Is that what the hammer's supposed to be for? No. Does it work, though? Yes. Yeah, sometimes. Okay. What about screwdrivers? I've got 3 different screwdrivers here. They are different. And what about screwdrivers? This one has a slot. These have square ends. One's a number 1, one's a number 2. Mr. Lewis, what would you tell me about those 3 screwdrivers? They're made for different screw heads. What if I try to use this slot one on a Phillips head? Probably won't work very well. What Jeff say, get my hammer? What if I try to use this Phillips head on a slot? I better get my hammer, right? So what am I saying here? Tools are made for different jobs. And if you use the right tool for the right job, it works pretty well. What's this thing here? Boy, you look bright. Would it work would it work to drive a nail? If it wasn't too big a nail, right? It might, but it probably wouldn't work too long. What about this thing here? Measuring tape. Could I use that for a hammer? Has anybody ever used a measuring tape for a hammer? Now, come on, be honest. What's that? You want to drive a nail in styrofoam, you could use it. Drive a nail in styrofoam, you could use it. Okay. You could also break the... What's this thing? That's a chisel. Could you use it for a screwdriver? You could. What might happen if you did? What are some consequences of using this for a screwdriver? You could injure yourself. And what about the chisel? It wouldn't be very sharp afterwards, would it? I'm trying to make no pun intended here. I'm trying to make a point. This doesn't have a point, it has an edge, but what about this and this? They're both what? Pliers. Did they do the same job? Well, more or less, yeah. More or less. What if I need to get around something really big? Are these going to work? When you got your right hand, the plumbers use that sometimes too. Okay, they have different purposes, right? What am I trying to say here? Social media is a tool. Social media is a tool. By the way, are these good things? Is this a good thing? Yeah. Is it a bad thing? No, it can be. It can be. Could I do bad things with it?
Yes. Use it as a weapon and beat somebody up.
I could beat somebody up.
And kill them.
If you don't be good.
Whoa.
No, seriously.
No, seriously.
People have used these for very bad purposes. Does that make the hammer a bad thing?
It's not the tool, it's the operator.
It's not the tool, it's the operator, right? Okay, so if somebody kills somebody with a hammer, what should we do to hammers? We should get rid of them all, right? Because somebody got killed with a hammer.
No.
Well, if somebody shot somebody with a gun, what are we going to do? We're going to get rid of all the guns, right?
Get rid of the guns.
Anyway, that's another statement for another day. Okay. We can't say a tool is either good or bad. Why can't we? Because it's just a thing, right? It's just a thing. Don't blame the tool. There's an old saying that says a poor craftsman blames his tool. Okay? A poor craftsman blames his tool. If you're a good craftsman, don't blame your tool. If you did a bad job on something, it's not the tool's fault. Maybe the fool's fault, but not the tool's fault. Okay? So don't blame the tool. So, bottom line is, social media is a tool, or a whole set of tools. I got not a whole bag full, but I got several tools in that bag there. And they all have different purposes. And they all work very well for the purpose for which they were intended. And some of them will do other things, but not very well. So let's apply that to social media as we think about it. Are we using social media in the right way and for the right reasons? So, this is a Sunday school class. This is not a sociology class. This is a Sunday school class. So now that we've set the stage, let's search the scriptures. And so we're going to be in Philippians chapters 1 through 4. We won't get all the way through today. But Paul had some things to say. Paul was a communicator. How do we know Paul was a communicator? Well, he wrote most of the New Testament, didn't he? He was a communicator. Now, we'll confine ourselves, I'll lift the whole book up here, but is this still relevant today? Paul wrote it a couple thousand years ago. Is it still relevant today? Is it still important today? Is it less important because it was written on parchment by whomever? Paul, we say Paul wrote it. Paul probably didn't physically write most of it, although it says he wrote some of it. He says, I wrote this with my own hand. He doesn't probably physically write it, but it was written with ink on parchment and so on. It wasn't written like this, and it wasn't printed with a printing press, and when it was copied, it had to be copied by hand and so on. Does that make it less important today? No. The message is not diminished in importance nor in relevance. It's just as important and just as relevant today as it was when it was written. So, we have new ways, but we don't have new words. There are those today that says everything's new today and we need a new message. No, we don't need a new message. We need more of the old message. That's part of our problem today in our society, is that we've forgotten the old message and we're trying to get a new message, and the new message is not the truth. So, social media can be a positive tool. Social media can be a positive tool. How did we find people in the past? If you needed to look up your long-lost great third cousin or long-lost great aunt or something or other, how would you have attempted to find that person in the past? What would be one of the first places you'd go to? Archives probably wouldn't tell you about somebody that's living, but yeah. Okay, what would you do? What are some ways we've all done? Okay, ask somebody. Okay, ask somebody. Where does Aunt so-and-so live, right? Okay, what's another way? Okay, the Yellow Pages, the phone book. What's another way before there was even Yellow Pages? Some of you can remember. Well, didn't even have white pages sometimes. What did we do? Some of you can remember this. Mary, you must remember this. You call the operator, right? You call the operator and say, can you find me a phone number for so-and-so? My wife could probably tell me a few instances of people calling about that. She used to be a telephone operator. Wasn't that what we did? Some of us older people, some of you people don't even know if there is such a thing as an operator, right? And you certainly didn't use a crank phone. Some of you might have been a crank on a phone, but you didn't use a crank phone. Okay, we found people in the past by the phone book. Dial 0 for operator. Ask around. And how do we find people today? Well, the answer is we find them by social media, right? So, did Paul have social media? Not really. Not in the sense that we have it today. Did he have media? Yeah, he had some parchment. They wrote letters back then. And how did they travel and get them from place to place? By airplane or what? Somebody went them. Timotheus went and took a letter, or Epaphroditus went and took a letter, or Onesimus went and took a letter, and he took it, and he had to go on a horse and on foot and over the sea, and